All right, we want to welcome you to our church tonight. This is a different style of church that we're going to have. What we normally do on Wednesday night is it's such an open format to where it's topic driven and people have the opportunity to come in with questions and what's some things on their mind. With that being said, it's a pretty in-depth Bible study. We try to learn the Word, write the Word on our heart, learn it so in times of need, it's there. Many years ago, I started learning Bible stories, and I felt like for every Bible story, it taught me something, a truth that I could tie into almost any area of my life or what kind of trials or tribulations that I might encounter. So with that, since you're not here, I've invited two dear friends of mine. We have Trey Morris here and Tom Kirkpatrick. Both of them are very involved in our church. It's very appropriate to have them here, and I appreciate you guys being here with me, make it a little bit more comfortable as we try not to alter the format that we normally have on Wednesday with open dialogue. So with that, I'd like to ask the question of what do you feel the pulse is with people in the marketplace, in your homes. What are people talking about right now, especially with coronavirus and quarantine and things like that?
Well, I personally, with my job going into people's homes, I see a lot of people from all walks of life, and there's a lot of people that are scared. Older people are scared. People are canceling their appointments and things like that, which I respect. But then other people that I've met have been asking me what I thought about it, if I thought that it was something like God's wrath on us, on society. A lot of people were bringing up things that happened in New Orleans, like when the hurricane and Katrina. Yeah, that was something that, that place was so bad that was God's way of trying to clean it up, and they think that this might be something related, in a way like that. Told them I couldn't have an answer for it. I really don't know.
Well, as Christians, you always have to, throughout the Bible, there's always been trials and tribulations. That's why James says, count it all joy when you face those, that it builds perseverance, it builds patience for the great day coming. I do want to share this, and I'm not leaving you out, but I'm just going to tackle what he just brought up. Because I'm hearing the same thing. People are saying, in this new bill they proposed that there was going to be this, like a digital currency. And those that know the Word, you've known this for years. It's been taught for years in the church about going to a one world government. You hear about going to the mark of the beast and what's that going to look like. In every generation, there's been enough to make people say, this could be it. This could be what it is. But people really don't want to talk about it. We've been in the bad place over the last, I would probably say the last 15 to 20 years in the church. We had a shift of people more concerned with what's relevant to them and their lives instead of being grounded in the Word for what it is. The case in point is I had people complain one time when we were going through the book of Revelation because it was like it's doom and gloom. And, how's this helping me today? Mm-hmm. Well, if you were to fast forward that from the time that I said that to today, it'd be real relevant. I mean, that'd be like saying, hey, I can see this happening now. We've had a couple moments in history to where things were changed. When you look in the Bible, it paints that picture. It shows things that's happened, but you have to get in it. And it's a living Word that kind of exposes some things. So I want to put to rest. I can do that tonight. If we can kind of look at two different places, because I'm hearing the very same thing. You see a post on Facebook, God's, this is it, get everything right. This is the end of the times and all this. Well, when you know the Word, you can kind of see and kind of, track some things through it. So I want to read in two different places. We're going to be in Revelation. I do want to look in Revelation. I asked you earlier to read a verse. If you want to read that verse, it's in quote where it is, or reference where it is.
Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. It said, blessed is the one who reads the word of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it, because the time is near.
It is the only book. Now, people could argue that there's 66 books and you're blessed to read everything, but it is the only book, if you look at those 66, that offers a promise of a blessing for those that hear the words of that prophecy. And I used to, when I would teach through Revelation, I would read that and I would say, could anybody here use a blessing? Because I know I sure can. The problem with it is when people read it, they're not understanding what it's talking about. So it seems like, well, how can I read something? It's kind of, I can't understand it. And God's saying it's okay, because there's a blessing in you reading His Word, knowing that it's inspired by God. It was written by John when he was banished to the island of Patmos, right? And God, this man's over 80 years old, and God is going to give him the greatest revelation in writing. That's where the whole book comes from. It's a something being revealed, revelation to John. He was the youngest disciple. He's written, this will be his 5th book that he writes. He's wrote the Gospel of John. He's wrote 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and then he's going to give us what God shown him when he was on the island of Patmos. So when I read that, I don't know if I want to read that first or read. Here, let me read this first in Matthew. I'm going to read in Matthew 24. When people talk about what's relevant in the Bible, about end times and stuff like that, I noted 3 of the top 3 topics in the Bible. You'll have some people toss in their money. There'll always people say, Jesus spoke this much about money. The Bible talks about, stewardship and stuff like that. Not to argue that it's not. But in the top 3 topics, number 1 is salvation. You're going to hear about salvation. Number 2 is the second coming. You'll see that laced through in different texts of the Bible that you can pull that out. We're talking about the second coming. And the third is in this great day, this tribulation period. On the Old Testament, Jeremiah says that the bad times are coming. We've seen nothing like it that's going to happen. So we see a lot of that pointed to that great day. It's God's final wrath. So in Matthew, a lot of people think he was one of he was one of the 12. I was thinking about Luke was the doctor. Matthew was a tax collector. Some people would reference his name as Levi. His name was also Levi. Jesus gives him some words here. This is written, if your Bibles have any red letters, that is words that were spoken by Jesus. And they're asking, the disciples are wanting to know, what's going to happen? What's going to be the sign of the end of the times? So Jesus answers, it says this in Matthew 24. I'm just going to read 4 through 8. And as much as you've heard this and you've read it, there's a sequence happening here that we're going to see exactly in the book of Revelation. Let's read it. Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen. But the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. So that's the beginning. But I've read that a lot. Many times I've read right through there. You understand it. You can teach it. Now when I read in Revelation 6, it's got a purpose to it. That's what I thought would be good to answer your question, because I'm hearing the same thing. I used to love to go through the book of Revelation until, feedback was, what's that got to do with me? Well, I think now it's got a pretty good, it will really relate to us. If you're not familiar with Revelation, as I mentioned, what's happening with John, he's writing this. He starts out, there's letters that's going to go out to the churches. The church, essentially, there's 7 churches that's referenced here. And those were churches in Asia Minor, but they also represent all of us today in different churches. One of those that you're probably familiar with, I'm just looking at it right here, is the Church of Laodicea. Every time I think of that church, I think how some people have to be very careful, because we always look at growing our church, growing our body, getting many, many people, and we start looking at what resources we're growing. And my mindset it's in line with what they're doing as long as it carries this thing that I don't care as much to see people here as I care to see them in heaven. This church had a little problem, Church of Laodicea. And when you hear about that church, you say, oh, that's the church where he said you neither hot or cold. I wish you'd be the one, or I just want to spew you out of my mouth. But the part that I pick up on it, and this is where you can see where churches are at risk sometimes of growing themselves and to a point of debt, growth, and trying to acquire too much. They boast in that. He says this, and then we're going to get to chapter 6. He says, you say I'm rich, I've acquired wealth, and I do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I mean, so that's a pretty big rebuke right there on that church. Several churches are going to have some things pointed to them, and we all as churches fall into one of those categories of 7 churches. So once he sends this word to wake up the church, to tell them, if you don't do these things, I'm going to move my spirit out of there, and you guys are going to be on your own. That's what he's talking to the church. Then, this is where it can come into different debates, controversial. I use that term of what do you believe, whether the church is going to be here during the final 7-year tribulation, mid-trib, or you're going to go through the whole thing. And there's people that can argue all 3 of those areas, and depending on who you're talking to, they can be convincing.
I had somebody asked me about that, if I was, because it came up, was I pre-trib, during, or post, and I just looked at him and I said, what does it matter?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's the position you could take, because at the end of the day, you're saved.
Because I didn't want to argue with him about it, what my thought was on that. I'm not going to change his mind, but at the end of the day, it's we're either going to be part of it or not. It's going to happen. What I believe is they're going to change it.
Because we're going to enter that 7 years. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. Did you want to add anything on that before I give my perspective?
The question on, and I don't want to get in an argument over pre-bid or after trib or whatever. I don't think that's the real question people should be addressing. Because a lot of things that lie ahead are a mystery, mostly because people interpret it in different ways. I think the question is who's on the throne in your heart? And if the Lord is on the throne, then you should have no fear, no matter what lies ahead of us.
Yes.
I agree. The 3, even though we say, it really doesn't matter. But biblically, where we teach, or I teach, is where you would be the pre-trib. There's too much that indicates the church will be removed before this happens. Mm-hmm. What we see John, and where it kind of comes out here, you won't hear the word rapture, you won't see the word rapture in the Bible. You hear things like called away, called up. John is essentially writing from one perspective. This goes to the letters to the church. And then he said, after these things, he was caught up in the Spirit. And then he's observing things from above. So it's like the church is out. You hear in other texts in the Bible where it says the people will meet, he'll descend, and people will meet, they'll be taken away. So there's enough information here to indicate that during this final 7 year, we will not be there. I have a very good friend that is a pastor. He can argue mid-trib, that you're going to be there through some of it. It's up to you. It's not. There's certain things that are that you just don't argue. But for this sake, let's teach it that the church, after the letters went to the church, and now that he's been taken away, he's going to see these things. Let's imagine the church body is not here. Okay. When that takes place, anybody that has not been churched, they don't have anywhere to go. They better remember what they've been told. They better remember everything that's been taught, because there's not going to be people here that's going to be teaching them about what this Bible says. But there'll be people left behind, because there's a lot of people that think that they are saved. And that's why we don't judge people, because only God knows their heart. But here's what he says after the letters. He sees God. And in God's hand, there's a scroll. And in his emotions, he can't find anyone worthy to open the scroll, to open the seals there. It says, I watched the Lamb open the first of 7 seals. Who's the Lamb? That's Jesus Christ. He said there was only one person that was worthy to open the seals from that scroll that was in the hand of God. Mm-hmm. So when Jesus opens the scroll, he is the one that's worthy to open the seal. This is where you're going to see God's final wrath upon humanity, upon this earth. And it's going to start out, the sequence that we just read about in Matthew, you're going to see the same sequence here, and we'll compare the two. He said, I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, come. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. He opens the first seal, and you're going to see it usher in 4 horsemen. This is an apocalypse. Mm-hmm. When he ushers in these horses, the debate is on what each one represents and what it tells us here. But we're going to see the parallel to what it says in Matthew. So the first horse is a white horse. So you would think that a white horse is something pure, because that's what white represents. But remember, we're going to see Jesus come back at the end of Revelation on a white horse. This one is a counterfeit. If you want to deceive somebody with money, let's say, when somebody prints, what do they call money that's not real? Counterfeit. They print that money. They don't print it with a different picture on it. They print it with it looks exactly like this. This president's on this one. It's this one. They look exactly like. This one is a counterfeit. This white horse is going to come in, which may seem like it could be something pure, but it's not. It's given the voice like thunder. Or the voice like thunder says, "Come." I looked, and therefore was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. Now that's significant. If you read in Genesis chapter 10, it tells us about a guy named Nimrod. Now, when you hear the name Nimrod in the 20th century, 21st century, you think that's an idiot. But Nimrod was a hunter. Can you pull that one up in Genesis 10? Let's see what it says about Nimrod. And I want you to be reminded that this guy was also a great builder. And he was the one who really built Babylon, started that whole project. All the pagan religions go all the way back to Babylon. What does it say about Nimrod?
In chapter 10, verse 8, Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord.
So he was a mighty hunter. So here you see a bow represents someone that's hunting. Mm-hmm. Nimrod would have been the first dictator that we saw in the Bible. You don't hear a lot about that, but that's a name that people don't really discuss. That's why you have Bible studies. You can start looking at this. So there are some similarities to this first dictator. We're going to start a lot of pagan religions, and we're going to see this counterfeit person come, seeming to be pure, but he's going to come to hunt, and he's going to come to kill. Held a bow, and it says a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. So he's going to go out and start a lot of trouble. When the Lamb opened the second seal, which is Jesus opening the second seal, I heard the living creature say, "Come," and another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given the power to take peace from the earth and to take men, slay each other. To him was given a large sword. So here we see battle. It's a war that's going to happen. So the first horse you see was someone coming out to deceive the nations, deceive people. And now we're going to see war. That's happened. We've seen it happen even in history. There was a time where people thought that Hitler was going to be, he has great ideas and he's going to be able to really change everything. And it was Winston Churchill that said, "Don't listen to what he's saying." And we found out later that we should have listened, that he was right. Mm-hmm. And you throughout time, we're going to see another person come on the scene here that's going to appear. to be a person that's going to have peace, and there's going to be peace for the first time between the Arabs and Israel, and it's going to look very good. But the Bible's going to tell us that he will end up breaking that covenant halfway through this tribulation time. And if we think it's gotten bad so far, at that point, it's unthinkable. I used to tell people would say, 7-year tribulation is 3.5 years of good and 3.5 years of bad. There's no good. It's 3.5 years. If you were to break that into 3 areas, it's bad, it's worse, and then it's unthinkable. You can't imagine what's going to happen. So now we see the Antichrist comes on. We'll say that's the white horse. You're going to see that. I see it. We're going to see that we're going to go to the war, and then he's going to say, he tells us he sees another horse came out. If I already read one, let me read that, and then I'll go right into it. Which was given a power to take peace from earth and slay men. That's war. The next one, the Lamb opened and saw a third seal. I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like the voice of 4 living creatures, and a quart saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wage, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wage." What that's related to, there's historically, and we always know that what follows war is famine. We're seeing it right now with people even rationing out toilet paper, rationing paper towels. I went through the line the other day and I didn't get water. I didn't get paper towels. And I looked down and there was a stack of them next to the register. And I asked the lady, I said, were y'all rationing out those? And she said, yes. So what that was people that they tried to stock too many, and she said you can only buy 1 or 2 or whatever the amount was. So they leave it. So I said, well, can I get one? She said, yeah, because you don't have one. So I was able to get that. You're going to see after war comes famine, rationing. Now, when you read here about this, this part here where it says a pair of scales in his hand, there's going to be rationing things for sure. Then I heard what sounded like a voice, hold on, saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages." Where that relates to is in that day, historically speaking, that was related to a soldier during the time this was written, what a soldier's daily food ration was and what they would make. So essentially he's saying that what your daily wage is not even going to cover. It's going to take all of that just to survive. So it's going to get bad. And then it says, to add something here, do not damage the oil and the wine. You're going to see that some people won't be hurt there at that time. That's going to come later. We'll get to one more horse and then we'll pull it together. And then he saw the 4th seal, and I heard the voice from the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Some of the Bibles might call it an ash horse. I listened and read some commentary about it. It could be like where the word comes from, chlorinated, where it would be almost a greenish color. But pale horse. Its rider had the name Death, and Hades was following close behind him, and they were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, plague, and by wild beast of the earth. So this seems like it's a very bad thing that's going to happen. But when you see the sequence of God's wrath, this is just the beginning of 3 different waves, each in 7s. There's 7 seals. At the end of the 7th seal, it ushers in 7 trumpets. At the end of 7 trumpets, the last one ushers in 7 bowls. And they just continue to get worse and worse. It starts out being ground with war, pestilence. It ends up becoming cosmic. You'll see things from above happen. We're definitely not going to get there tonight, but here's the parallel. The first one we read here, and I noted it, the white horse, the guy came to deceive. If we read in Matthew, what it was saying in Matthew 24, let me get back to it. Said this was when they were asking what's going to happen. It said, "Watch that no one deceives you." So there's deception, and we see in Revelation that they're being deceived by the white horse. Then he said, "Many will come in my name," right? Because that would be like the Antichrist. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it you're not alarmed, because it must happen. So we see war there. And then he sees nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes coming. So here's the sequence. The white horse, deception. Red horse, wars. Black horse, famine. And then death represents the end of all this. So you see the same sequence that Jesus was laying out in Matthew happening over in Revelation. So when people ask me, what do you think of this right here? If anything, it is, if it was a message, it's a postcard compared to what's going to happen, what's around the corner, what's going to turn for us. Remember, as we are learning in Revelation, the whole word revelation, things being revealed to us, that's where we're going. What should the Christian do? You should be in lockstep with each other. Encourage the brothers. Be in lockstep. Understanding the faith. Be in prayer. Knowing that we're going through this journey together. Knowing that you're in the church age, every person has the opportunity now, before that time, to avoid all of that. You know, we're supposed to be saying, Lord, come quickly. He says it several times in Revelation that the Lord's coming soon, coming soon. And we're supposed to be asking for that. You know, I ask God to forgive me sometimes because sometimes I don't want Him to come tomorrow. I just had somebody the other day say, you know, the Lord's going to return. And somebody said, oh, well, He needs to come tonight. He needs to come tonight. I, in some ways, don't want Him to come back tomorrow because I know too many people that don't know Him as their Savior. And I don't want them to see. I got people in my family, I got people I know that they will struggle through that time. So as much time as I can have to reach people, to share the gospel message, they're not going to go through a Bible study like this. They're not going to see, they're not going to care about what Nimrod did. They're not going to know about Babylon. They're not going to want to, they're not going to know or care to know about that type of stuff. The Bible tells us that some people are starting on milk, then they get on bread, and then they get on meat. We like to get into a little bit of the meat. You know, hang out a lot of the bread, and we get into the meat part of it. There's people that still need the milk to know that Christ loves them, that Christ died for them. Every person has eternity in their heart and in their soul. There's something that's just desiring that. The world can distract you with all the things that it offers, the lures of the world. And that's where that Antichrist is going to come in and lure people. But as a Christian, you're not grounded in the things of the world. You're grounded in Him. Therefore, when you go through trials and tribulations, it draws you closer. There's more hope. And I know we push the time. A lot of times we try to keep these under 30 minutes. We're probably pushing that. Tom, you got anything to add? And possibly, I'll let you close us.
Well, there's two things. First, answering the question, what are people saying? Is the people I talk to are mostly people in the church because I'm involved in the church. It's part of my duties here. And most people I talk to are somewhat frustrated. They don't seem to know what to do. And for some reason they can't seem to find their hope and their joy because all of these problems that we're having is just wearing them down, and they don't know where to turn, they don't know what to do, they don't know the right thing to do. And to be honest with you, I'm a little puzzled by that, but there is a solution. Is we were studying about the tribulation and after the tribulation, well, studying about the tribulation, and I'll take a position on that, is that I'm not one who believes that the church is going to have to go through that. But we're not there yet. This is a wake-up call. God gives wake-up calls. He gave it all through Israel's history. And this is a wake-up call for us. And what do we need to do? And in 2 Chronicles 7:14 is not the only answer, but it's a well-known answer. And it is this: and if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. That's the answer to all of our frustrations that we're having, all of our questions. It's always been, seek the Lord. That is where the answer is, because His gift, free gift by His grace through faith, is eternal life. And when you have that, and you have that perspective, it's not a wishy hope, it's a fact hope. And it can carry you through the hardest struggles that you have. You can find peace in that. You can find joy in that. And you can have peace in your spirit over that. And that is the answer. Not just for our present trial, but the ones that are still coming. And that's
Amen.
my point.
What a perfect way to close on that. Can be well said. For those that are studying, you're part of this church, let Tom know some questions that you have. You know, the church email, send him some questions that you want to dive into. We can continue to read. Take a chance and read through there. I know to some that I've heard you say, you know, it gets a little, I guess you can't understand it. Well, it's common, but listen to the verse that Trey read at the very beginning that said, you know, blessed are those who hear the words and read the words in here. So read it, internalize it, let your mind see it, and offer some questions up, and maybe we can expose it next Wednesday, possibly. But I thank everybody for watching us. This was the first time. It's only one take. We're not going to be playing that game, doing more takes and all that. So we're going to trip up, but that's who we are. That's Durant, and we ask you just to be blessed. Ask the Lord every morning before your feet hit the floor to direct your paths and direct your steps, and just realize that you don't have all the answers. We're growing through this together. God bless.